My name is Sunny, and in the year 2026, I am attempting to go through as much of Star Wars as is physically possible. When I say that, I mean all of the movies, all of the books, all of the TV series, any game that I have access to through the various consoles that I own, any comics that I have access to, meaning all of the Marvel stuff, not the Dark Horse stuff, because I do not have infinite money and I cannot be buying all these comics. And I want to get through everything, going from phase 2 of the High Republic, which chronologically comes before phase 1, and ending with what right now will be The Last Command by Kwame Umbalya, the book about Finn and Jedha that kind of technically takes place after The Rise of Skywalker, but not really. Or tentatively, if this takes until 2027, Starfighter will be my last thing, but hopefully I am able to get through what I need to get through. And what I need to get through is literally all of Star Wars. One might ask, Sunny, why are you doing this to yourself? You've read all of the Star Wars books, you've seen all the series, you've done all the movies. Why do this? And to that I say, I don't know. Last year I read every single Star Wars canon novel, and after doing that I kind of felt like there would be a gap in my Star Wars heart. So I committed to doing this before really sitting down and making a list of everything. I was like, oh, how much could it possibly be? It's 500 rows on a spreadsheet. There's a good chance that this is not possible to do within a single year, it already being February and I have only gotten through phase 2 of the High Republic, but a girl can dream, and famously Yoda said, do or do not, there is no try. And that is why this series is called Tint. There is no try. Eagle-eyed viewers may notice that I had a video on my page that was a podcast format, also called Tint. I wanted to try out a new format, but I was really not happy with the quality of that video, so it's currently unlisted. My original plan for this was to sit down and record a podcast-style episode for every single thing that I go through, and I'll be so honest, I don't think any of us want that from me. If you do, let me know. I'll consider it. Or I'll consider maybe doing it in chunks. I don't know. If I were to attempt that again, I definitely need to get a better setup because the audio quality was not good. Anyways, as I mentioned, I am done with phase 2. I have been making TikTok videos about each of these as I have finished them over the month of January. So if you want to go back and watch those, there's a good chance I will have posted a compilation of those TikToks here for you guys to view. So if that's currently out, it'll be in the description. If it's not out, it'll be out like next week. So let's go through each of these. I'm going to share my thoughts, and then at the end, we are going to go through and look at the shape of the tier list. If you did not catch the first TikTok, I did make the executive decision that I would be ranking these, not necessarily by number, but by tier. I go back and forth on things a lot, and a tier list, I think, gives me a little bit more flexibility. And I think that's all of the prerequisites out of the way. Let's get into this. The first thing that we experienced on our Star Wars journey is Path of Deceit by Tessa Gratton and Justina Ireland. This book introduces us to half loosely of the characters that we will be following. Most importantly being the members of the Path of the Open Hand, including Marta Rowe, her cousin Yana Rowe, the mother, the herald, a couple other people who may or may not be important for later. And this book just kind of sets up what we're working with. For the purposes of this video and in attempts to make this not 14 hours long, I'm not going to give a whole recap of any of these books. For this one, I remember being really fond of this book when I read it for the first time last year, and I think that this was one of the books where my expectations completely held up. This is an A+ read for me. It's not my absolute favorite thing. I think I originally gave this an S, then going back and looking back on it, I knocked it down to A+. I still do really love this book, but looking at some of the other things specifically in this phase, it doesn't quite hold up to them, though it's still really, really enjoyable. Tessa Gratton, specifically one of my top like 3 or 4 favorite Star Wars authors, and though you can't really tell who wrote what in this book, I think that she, as well as Justina Ireland, did a really, really fantastic job setting up this phase and giving it a really nice foundation. Number 2, Quest for the Hidden City by George Mann. This is our first middle grades book, as you can tell by the shape and size, and right off the bat, this is a C. It's objectively fine. You will see, for the most part, I'm not going to rate these middle grades books very high, but I am ranking them as a C and not anything lower because I have the the knowledge and understanding to say that these books are not specifically written with me in mind. In my big age, this type of book does not really affect me, and I don't think that George Mann sat down to write this with the intention of me doing critical analysis on it. This book follows a completely new cast of characters from the last one, but again, it's people we're gonna see later, specifically this girlie on the cover right here, Rupert, who is a Jedi Padawan, and her friend Doss, who will show up in the other middle grades book. I will say, one thing I do like about these middle grades books, the art in them, super cute. There's like 2 or 3 pictures, depending on how big each of these middle grades are, and they're just a good time. They're really fun, they're short. I think it took me 3-ish hours to get through this audiobook. So again, super short, nothing to write home about. It's not objectively terrible. It's definitely something that I was able to sit down and get through without feeling like I had to choke it down, but it's not something that I ever would reach for out of my own free will. Thus, a C. Next is Convergence by Zoraida Córdova. I have several times referred to Zoraida Córdova as my queen. This book is the prime example of why I think that she is such a talented writer. This book is incredible. It's so good. This is the first adult novel in the High Republic Phase 2. It introduces us to a third cast of characters who are going to be much more consequential than the ones that we saw in Quest for the Hidden City. Being this girl on the cover named Gala, her totally not boyfriend named Axel, who is the son of the current chancellor. Then we've also got Princess Iri and Prince Fontu from Irono and Aram, respectively. The main conflict for Phase 2 is the forever war that's happening between Iram and Arono. And it's going to keep popping up. It popped up a little bit in Quest for the Hidden City. And what we're really trying to accomplish in this book is putting an end to the war for good. Does it happen? No, of course not. We've got like 6 more books to go through, but they give it a good effort in this one. For me, this is an S tier. The writing is so good. The characters are so lovable and intriguing. And even the ones that I don't really like, I can still find really engaging and want to keep following their story, which I think is always the mark of a good writer. I shouldn't have started numbering these because I already can't remember what we're on. The Blade by Charles Soule. This is our first delve into the comics for Phase 2, and I have to say, really pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this one. This is a limited comic run. It was a super fun read. It follows Porter Engle, who is actually a character from Phase 1 of the High Republic, and I had not read this before, so it was super exciting to get to see him again. He is one of my favorite characters from Phase 1/3, so to be able to see him in this format when he's young and hot was really cool. Just for anyone who wanted a quick look at young and hot Porter Engle. Not gonna spend too long on that one. It's an A for me. Really fun, really short and easy to get through. Great artwork. I am so picky about the artwork for comics that I consume, and I have to say this one was really good. I think that the way that Charles Soule writes really thrives in comics, which I'm sure literally everyone else in the world already knows because he writes a ton of comics, both for Star Wars and for other projects. Reading one of his books and then going back and reading a comic that he's worked on is really night and day. It feels like he wants to put so much information into the books that he writes, and I think that having that visual aid of like, hey, you don't have to write all this down, we can put some of it in the art, really helps to make it a little bit less dense. Next, The Battle of Jedha by George Mann. George Mann becomes our first repeat author for this chronological journey as he wrote the first audio drama, The Battle of Jedha. Now, I've said this in basically every video where I've ever talked about this. If you have never picked up the High Republic, first, do not start with Phase 2. Please do yourself the service of starting from Phase 1 and reading them in release order. Also, do not read the audio dramas. They are just a script. And as much as I love reading through a script, they are meant to be listened to. They're done by a full cast, and it is just so lovely. Cannot recommend enough not reading this. I would say that The Battle of Jedha is the peak on the bell curve for the High Republic Phase 2. This is where everything really starts to go down and everything starts to get really drastic. This, when I read it for the first time, shot me straight into space. Reading it for the second time, I felt a little less positive about it. It just felt very rushed. As much as I love it and treasure it for that first time experience of it being 5-star best of all time kind of read for me, I was a bit disappointed going into it this time and realizing that I didn't really love it as much, which I think is okay to have happen. It means that I have grown and changed as a person, I guess. I did definitely find some flaws within this book that I didn't quite grab onto the first time. This is still an A- for me. It's really fun, really engaging. The characters are really fun. There are just a couple times where it feels either really rushed and compact or really slow. Next, Star Wars The High Republic 2022 by Charles Soule. That is a little bit of a weird way to introduce that, but the way that I read it were 2 trade paperbacks, volume 1 and volume 2, but I read them back to back on Marvel Unlimited. And they ended up with the exact same ranking, so I figured why not just lump them together? They're the same comic run at the end of the day. So this book takes place a little bit before, during, and after the events of Battle of Jedha. It follows a new group of characters which will pop up at the conclusion of Phase 2, but overall I was not super intrigued by them or the plot or really anything about these comics. They were objectively fine. I was sitting there just kind of wishing that I was done with it. At the end of the day, for me, they weren't really engaging, and they gotta be more enjoyable than the middle grades book, but less enjoyable than literally everything else I've read so far. Next, Quest for Planet X by Tessa Gratton. This is the second and final middle grades book, and I have to say, this book is so deeply inconsequential to the rest of the story. I have always famously said, if you are going to read The High Republic, you should read all of The High Republic. And I mean that just for the book. If you want to skip over the multimedia stuff, I think that they're worth the read, but I understand where you're coming from. If you go into a book series, you're looking for books. I understand that. But within that, I've always said you should read all of them because you want to get the full story. If there was one book that if you went, Sunny, I only have 47 hours to read all of The High Republic and I could not possibly squeeze another 3 hours into it, what can I cut? This would probably be it for me. Not because I don't love it, because this is probably one of my favorite middle grades books from The High Republic, and probably just from all of the Star Wars books that I've read. This is top 3, if not top 2. That being said, this has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of The High Republic Phase 2. There are some characters that show up again, Ripper and Das being one of them. We get another kid named Sky, who's a Graf. We get some Santeca mentions in here. Some people from the Path of the Open Hand show up in here. We never bring this up again. It doesn't really make any sense why this is what this book was. I think that it is still written really well and it's really enjoyable. If you have the extra 3 hours to listen to it, probably less if you're reading it, to be honest, it's really short, I would listen to it. Again, Tessa Gratton, one of my favorite authors. This book is fun, just incredibly inconsequential, and thus it gets a C. C+ though. Next up, Cataclysm by Lydia Kang. This is the second adult novel and the second to last actual book in the High Republic Phase 2, and we are starting to wrap up the plot. This is kind of the conclusion to a lot of stories, and it sets up really nicely for the final book. This is an S tier read for me. Again, I find that these characters to be the most compelling out of the groups that we get in Phase 2. The quadruplet of Axel, Gela, Fontu, and Ziri is really compelling, and I think that the journey that they all go on is really rewarding to get through, especially by the end of this one. There are some really emotional moments in this book that I mentioned in the TikTok that I made about it when I first finished reading it. It gets kind of heavy, and that's kind of what I'm in it for these Star Wars books. I want things to get drastic and kind of harrowing because I guess I'm just sick like that. The last actual book for Phase 2, Path of Vengeance by Cavan Scott. This book is thick and in the least drastic way possible. I did not care for this book. At least this much I did not care for. This part, good, loved it. That much, maybe not. My main issue with this book, which again I'm not going to rehash entirely because I have already talked about this, is that it takes so much time to give information that has already been given, both in other books and in the comics. It gives almost the entirety of the plot for the High Republic 2022 comics, and that just drives me absolutely crazy. If you want people to go read and engage with the full multimedia project, give me the Spark Notes, not the entirety of the book. It took so much time to set up, and it just completely crushed the momentum that the first half of this book built up. There are some really enjoyable moments in here, but they are completely crushed by the fact that we had to go through and rehash the same exact thing. I did really enjoy that last third, but unfortunately for me, this is a D tier read, the first and only D tier that I have ranked thus far. And finally, Tales of Enlightenment by George Mann, the first author to go triple platinum within Star Wars chronologically. George Mann, you will see as we go throughout this journey, has written a lot of these short stories, and this is no exception. There are 6 short stories in here about the bar Enlightenment that we first get introduced to in Battle of Jedha. I think like the typefacing and just visually, this book is really, really well done. But if I'm being honest, my favorite part about it are the interviews in the back of the book. With this one, it really did feel like all of the short stories kind of blended together, and they're not really of any consequence. They're fun, but they're about characters that don't really matter and that we're never going to see outside of this. And I just couldn't really get into it. What I could get into though are the interviews in the back talking to all of the authors from the High Republic Phase 2. I thought those were really enjoyable. I think that most of them are reprints from Star Wars Insider. Those are really fun. I love those behind the scenes kind of things, and I feel like we don't get that with the authors a lot, so I really enjoyed that. Didn't enjoy the short stories. For me, Tales of Enlightenment, C-. As we go on and get more stuff on the tier list, that might become a D, but it will be above, at the very least, Path of Vengeance. We have officially inverted the stack, which means that we have gone through the entirety of the High Republic Phase 2. I would say overall, my enjoyment of this phase was a little bit less than what it was when I initially read it, though that's not to say that I had a bad time with it. I still thoroughly enjoyed my time with this series. There are some really, really fun moments that I had forgotten about that brought me to tears. Phase 2 down, roughly 400 more rows on a spreadsheet left to get through. I am a little bit disappointed in myself that it took me a full month to get through just this. I know that if I had actually like put my head down and grinded, I probably could have gotten through this in half, or if not a third of the time, especially because none of this was particularly time consuming. All of these took a day or less to finish. So not a super great start to this, just time-wise, not content-wise. I am hoping to do a little bit better here in the month of February, though as I am recording this, we are like 2 weeks into the month already, and I'm only 2 things into the High Republic Phase 1, so I am trying my absolute best. Things just keep coming up that are impeding my reading time / watching time, because we are getting into some of the shows, which is exciting. As we go through, I want to do a tier list for each section. So Phase 1, Phase 2, Clone Wars, New Republic sections, and then one big tier list of everything. I think that will be really fun. Here's a look at technically both tier list right now, since we only have the Phase 2 to look at. And I think that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching if you made it all the way through. Let me know if you like this format, if there's any stats or information that you would like me to include in these. Like I said at the top, if you want to go back and watch all of the content that I was making in the moment while I was reading all of this stuff, I will leave the link to it down below. I'm also going to make a playlist that's going to house all of my Star Wars chronological order stuff, and I'll make sure that that's linked at the end of the video in the card section. I really appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for indulging me in this very silly thing that I am attempting to do. If you liked the vibe here, or at the very least if you want to follow along on this journey, make sure you press the subscribe button. Thank you for being here. You individually are so appreciated, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.